This is the CFL This Week.
Welcome to CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil, your host, and of course, we are gone together in a roundtable form. And of course, this program is about discussion on a roundtable forum about the hottest topics in the Canadian Football League. And boy, have we assembled an all-star cast for our very first show. Let's start with the likes of Matthew Cauz, a contributor to CFL.ca, and of course the always unpredictable host on TSN 1050. We have David Sanchez from the CFL on TSN, former defensive back with the CFL and, of course, the NFL. He has all kinds of, accolades. And, of course, we're looking forward to him because he certainly has something to contribute. Now, speaking of someone that has something to contribute, Jim Mullin, the president of Football Canada, and, of course, a man that has hosted the likes of Krown Countdown and I guess it's now called Krown Gridiron Nation is the new name for the show, probably the leading show when it comes to talking about amateur football and the NCAA and, of course, U Sports. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Bubba.
Guys, we had this show all planned out, as always, in terms of topics and what we're going to talk about, but all of a sudden, bam, last night, everything changed. Of course, reports coming from TSN's Farhan Logi that 5 players on the Edmonton Elks football team have tested positive for COVID-19, thus meaning the CFL were forced, in their opinion, to cancel this Thursday's upcoming match at BMO Field. I'm going to start with you, Matthew. What are your original thoughts when this story broke?
The first thought is always you hope everyone is safe, and you hope whatever it is in terms of how many people has caught it, that it is contained. So the human side to it always comes first. Then the next thought after that was from a more hyper-local standpoint. It's kind of disappointing because the momentum Saturday, Toronto was maybe their best offensive performance in years, beating Winnipeg. I was there at BMO Field. It was gorgeous to be there. It was great to be there. It's the only place you see Paul Masadi jerseys on a regular basis. And just, they did a great job at BMO of getting everyone in and out, and it was a great experience. So that momentum has been halted. So on the football side of things, I was looking at more what it meant for the city of Toronto. So that was my first thought. Jim, this had to be a surprise to you as well.
Yeah, it was a surprise, although we have heard of some COVID infections coming out of Edmonton and out here, out west, both in Alberta and British Columbia. We are struggling with a new rise in infections. So it's in the community, that's for certain. To see it, though, within a team with the numbers that we must be talking about, if they're talking about canceling, that's a concern because, reserve lists certainly have, you can go 10 players deep to put a team on the field if you're tapping into your reserve list. So this must be a significant infection and breakout. My wonder about this is how many of these players who have tested positive have taken the vaccine, and how many are under-vaccinated or not vaccinated at all. I'm not sure if that's something that the Elks or the CFL is going to be forthcoming with, but I think that'll be very telling to how the Elks team manages this.
Davis, I think you can come at this from a CFL.PA standpoint. I mean, obviously, you could look at this as a former player, a broadcaster right now, and someone that respects and follows the league and loves the league as well, too. We're talking about a team that previously had someone test positive, 2 players test positive. Up to the game time last week, someone test positive, and now we have 5 players testing positive. I mean, I'm going to have to come at you honestly. What's going on with the Elks?
Yeah, I just got this story late yesterday, and with my first thoughts, sadly or maybe rightly, I thought about similar to Matt, just momentum, and not just from Toronto, but the guys in the league in general started to build momentum. Now, how will this affect that? I'm going to wait to give opinion on what they're going to do and how this is going to play out, because I really don't know. Like I said, I'm just hearing this news now, but yeah, it's a concern. I feel bad for the guys. And this is, something that it's been talked about, but I don't think enough. These guys miss football for over a year. That's a lot. These guys are depending on this to make a living, and now you're going to take away 1/14 of their potential salaries, depending on how this plays out. And I feel for the guys just for what they've gone through from training and preparing and everything to get to this point. It's kind of we're coming up on Labor Day, like we talked about from a football standpoint, and then just to not have the checks, to not the uncertainty of what's going to happen. I do feel for the players, but also all parties involved in organizations and how this is going to play out, because it's scary for everybody.
Matthew, and I know you've obviously been on TSN. I've seen you as a contributor all across Bell Globe Media. This, on a broadcasting programming standpoint, Thursday Night Football has become kind of a big deal, and to not have a product has to be a disappointment for the network.
Oh, absolutely. Now you got to scramble to find what is going to be your live programming on the radio side, on the TV side. Usually this time of year, things are pretty light. It's why sometimes you'll see Rocky IV on TSN. That doesn't look like a sport, but, there it is. Yeah, you're absolutely right from a broadcasting standpoint. And also, there's a lot of people where they are freelance, where they're hired to help produce games. When you watch a CFL game, there's 10, 15, 20 people in the background. Then all the people at BMO Field, there's going to be a lot of people, not just players, that could potentially be losing a paycheck. And then from the broadcast side and the journalism side, to echo what Jim was saying, I don't want to treat this like a witch hunt. I want to treat this just like a analytical look at what's going on. I think we would all be curious to see who was vaccinated, who wasn't. Was it a lot of players or staff around the team that weren't vaccinated that caused it? And I want to know that information less as a witch hunt. I'm not here to shame players. That doesn't make things better. But if it was mostly players or staff, because we don't know if it was all players that were unvaccinated, that's just another piece of messaging that can be used to anyone that is hesitant right now to take the vaccination.
Jim, is this a fair comment to think that this was going to happen? Like, we're still in the midst of a pandemic right now. Is it fair to say that we should have expected this to happen?
Well, and I think that the CFL office and the PA did expect something like this to happen. And if they didn't either expect it or were prepared for it, I'd be very, very surprised. From a Football Canada perspective, we've been in dialogue with the CFL about return to play protocols, and even had informal discussions about what the challenges were ahead for the league, and how this was not going to be a straight line for them. Well, this is the first curve in the road for them, isn't it? The one thing that I'm interested in is if there are players that are sidelined for a while. Scouts are out in the field right now at NFL camps. It's this time for an early airlift into the Elks roster to give them some numbers to move forward. How does this impact player management for this team moving forward? I think those are big questions. I do believe that when this plan was first launched with this 14-game season, we didn't have the variant really on the radar. And if there was a concern about delayed games or canceled games, they'd be later in the season. So this will be the first test of that plan that the league has to try to reconfigure schedules and games.
Davis, from a standpoint of the players, and I know you're not far removed from being on the field and strapping them up and hitting guys, but I'm going to ask you on a teammate standpoint, because I know the vaccine question is a big one and it's a personal one, but can this divide a locker room?
No question. Yeah, and guys are not going to publicly come out and say stuff, or at least not very often. When you're talking about, you forget about, everyone has their own personal feelings. We know this. This is a personal deal, but you're affecting the team, one way or the other. When you're not getting vaccinated, or you're getting vaccinated because of, potential loss of revenues for guys and salaries for guys. To add to Jim's point real quickly about, this is a perfect time, the airlift guys, because if we're talking NFL preseason week 3, week 4, this is when guys start becoming available. But with the quarantine, the guys aren't going to be, if they do come in town, they're still going to have to sit out for, depending on what the situation is, but a while. So those guys won't be available for a bit. This is going to be how this plays out is going to be interesting from not only a personnel standpoint, which is right away what you think of when you talk about the product in the field, but then the divisiveness potentially in the locker room. If some guys who didn't get vaccinated, if there's guys in the locker room who did, who feel like they might have jeopardized either win losses for that team that they worked hard for, or potential salary. That, Bubba, to me is to your point, this could become an issue in the room for guys, especially if guys want to speak out on it. And then we're going to have a real scenario on our hands.
One last one to you there, Matt, and I know you love government conversations. You have certainly offered your opinion at times, but I'm glad you. Thanks for backing me up on that one. You have policies, which COVID policies for fans and for players. One just introduced today by the Tiger Cats. You have had Montreal; they have one going into effect September 1st. BC have some restrictions as well too, but Calgary and Edmonton have no restrictions. Is that a problem?
Yes, absolutely they do. There has to be some sort of uniformity, and I'm going to put partisan politics out of this, and I'll lay my cards on the line. I voted left and I voted right in the past. I don't just go skew one direction or the other. But if we have policy in place now with all these teams in all these other provinces, then Alberta should be the same way. They should have it so there is some sort of vaccination. You have to identify, you have to have your card or your proof of a negative test. It only makes sense. We see it now with the Blue Jays, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And we're seeing it with companies and businesses. This should happen. And what you'd like to see is that the local and the provincial government put aside any ideology to try to figure out what is best for the economy for these teams, and it makes sense that they step in line with everyone else because it would reduce what we're seeing. And I mean, my bigger concern is, or not my bigger concern, but one of my concerns is I want to see how they implement it. You're going to be asking people that take tickets. You're going to be asking them. It's nothing against someone who takes tickets, but you're going to be asking someone now to identify different medical identification and wow, are you're gonna have to train these people up in terms of being able to identify real vaccination cards versus false ones. That's going to be hard in terms of figuring that on the infrastructure. But this doesn't really seem like a big ask. And man, I'm sure it's now we're going way deep. Man, I'm sure it annoys when someone tries to harken back to mid-30s Germany and trying to compare that with showing that you've gotten a second vaccination to go watch a ball game. I think this needs to happen, and this conversation will probably be accelerated because what's happening with the Elks.
Yeah, that's really an interesting comment there, and I appreciate that. That's for sure there. Let's change gears, guys, and let's talk about the football field. And there's a guy by the name of Jake Mayer who has come in there and replaced Bo Levi Mitchell, who has a broken fibula. He came in there and looked like Johnny Manziel in the first quarter. And then he turned up the heat, went 16 for 29, 304 yards, a touchdown pass, and, of course, a couple of interceptions. Look, we know that Bo Levi Mitchell is the man and will be, and will always is the starting quarterback with the Calgary Stampeders while he is healthy. But is this guy the real deal? I'll start with you, Davis.
Oh, great comparison, Bubba. Johnny Manziel, first quarter. It's that's a descriptor. We don't even need to look at a stat sheet just to see that descriptor. But I don't know, Jake. Look, he was really good. And I talked to Dave Dickinson the day before the game, the day of the game actually, and I was surprised with what Dave had to say and his thoughts on Jake. And he told me that Jake is a guy that he knew would be best when the lights were on, and not he hoped, but he knew. And Dave's not. You guys know Dave. He's not a guy that's going to sugarcoat stuff or he tells it how it is. I was shocked, and I kind of knew that this kid was a gamer, and that goes to the reason to why he started the game, and because he believed that he was the best guy in a crucial situation. But look, it's one game sample. I wouldn't go over the top. I think his guys around him played really well. But yeah, one game sample. He was pretty good. Guys don't usually have success in their first start in the league, especially. Remember this guy had never put on gear. Not only not played, he hadn't put on gear before. and been out even as a number 2. So, the feeling well in the field and understanding the pregame rituals, the schedule, everything. He didn't even have that down yet. So I was certainly impressed, but having one game of film on a guy makes a whole lot of difference. So I think we'll get a better test of who he is, or another sample of who he is a week from now.
When it was announced that Bo Levi Mitchell had the broken fibula, it was assumed, and I think even said by a couple of players on the Stampeders, that Michael O'Connor was going to be the guy. He was going to be the next guy up in that our sports vernacular. Jim, you saw lots of this guy play at UBC. I mean, I'd never heard of Jake Maier. I'd heard of Michael O'Connor. Why didn't Michael O'Connor start? And does this have anything to do with being a Canadian quarterback?
I think when you take a look at the track record of the Calgary Stampeders and Canadian quarterbacks, whether you're talking about Andrew Buckley or even Brad Sinopoli, who did get a fair shot at playing quarterback in Calgary when Huff was the coach, I don't think that's the issue there. I think I'll go further to what Davis was talking about with his conversation with Dave Dickinson, and about talking about how he believed that Maier was the guy when the lights were on. Well, let's take a look at Maier and Dickinson as quarterbacks. They're both out of the Big Sky Conference. They're both Big Sky Players of the Year. Dickinson won the Walter Payton Award. Maier was on the watch list 3 times, and they both left their respective programs holding all kinds of records. Dave Dickinson knows the path that Jake Maier was on. Like he knows this guy and can trust the path that he's come from. He can identify with him. He can communicate with him. Now, when it comes to O'Connor's a different cat. He really is. He's calm. He's almost sedate. He's very balanced in the way he approaches things. O'Connor, as a quarterback at the U Sports level, delivered the football in ways I've never seen out of a quarterback. He does have professional potential. He can be a starter in the Canadian Football League. But if you're a coach like Dave Dickinson and you're backed into a corner and you see a week's worth of practice and you've got better communication and you share maybe even a little more in common with that guy that has the potential to start, you're going to go with your intuition because you're going to go with what you know. And what he knows is someone who shares that similar path with him.
Matt, Matt, what you mean? Is this guy a flash in the pan, or were you impressed?
Well, actually, I was really impressed. But also, it's Calgary, it's Huffnagel, it's just the infrastructure there. They always have those next players, and they're going to surround that player for success. What I found interesting that Jim was mentioning there is, here's a quarterback who did well in Sky or Mountain, like these smaller often Division II conferences where they're very productive, but they're not going to be on the radar of NFL teams. And then suddenly they find themselves in the CFL with success. Ricky Ray, Bo Levi Mitchell, Mike Riley. Like, you look at a lot of the top quarterbacks that are either still playing or recently retired, almost all of them followed that same journey as Maier. And I'm not comparing Maier to them. I'm not. It was a great one game, and good for him for being able to shake off turnovers early and be able to bounce back from it. But wow, when you hear that about his bio, it's eerily similar with a lot of quarterbacks that are very familiar to us all.
It sounds like you are comparing them, Matt. I'm going to
100%.
The next Bo Levi Mitchell.
Yes, I want that to say Matt Cauz, Maier next, Bo Levi Mitchell, 100% guarantee. By the way, then go take a look at my CFL picks and see how much you want to trust me.
Hey, can I add this, Jim? I want to ask Jim this. I don't know, Jim. You know Mike O'Connor. I don't know him. You said, I think you sedated or mellow, whatever words you use to describe him. But I have heard this. I want to know if that's part of the reason, because I've heard a few people who know Michael O'Connor say this, and I think it could be good to be a guy that's even keel, kind of takes everything with a grain of salt, comes in composed and calm. But maybe a lack of fire, and that doesn't, you don't necessarily have to have. There's a lot of great pros in different sports that are calm, but when you're going into your point, one game backup role, and they need you to pull it out. Do you think that the lack of fire that you see, and I've heard maybe a guy who doesn't take control as much as you would like, is that something you see in Mike? And not a negative, but just his demeanor and his personality, his makeup. Is that something you've heard or seen?
Yeah, I think that for a coach in Dickinson's position or an OC, it depends what you want out of your quarterback. Do you want that even keel? Do you want that low profile, quite frankly, in terms of ego in the huddle and running your offense? Or do you need a firecracker? We know that Bo Levi Mitchell as a quarterback, is that kind of firecracker guy. He's a high personality guy. It all depends what you want now. So the question that I have is Michael O'Connor a fit for the Calgary Stampeders moving on in the future now? Certainly, if I take a look at what his background is and where he's from and where a good matchup would be, I would say his future is in Ottawa. He's from Orleans, Ontario. He's part of that wave of talent that has come out of that region. He was really at the leading edge of it that led their way into the NCAA. And don't forget, like we talk about Michael O'Connor at UBC, he was highly touted coming out of IMG going into Penn State. And because of a coaching change at Penn State, they picked Christian Hackenberg over him at quarterback, which set the wheels in motion for him to be courted up to UBC. Everyone thought he was going to end up at Syracuse. He's a Division I quarterback, right? He's a Division I Power 5 quarterback when it comes to his skill set and pedigree. You can't actually even say that about Mayer. He's a 1AA quarterback. So the other thing too is, if I'm Dave Dickinson, I'm looking at a guy that kind of looks like me. He's the same size. He's got the same sort of pocket presence. Michael O'Connor is a straight drop back, flat-footed, big guy, prototype guy, 6'4", 6'5", in the pocket. Your offense is going to run slightly different in comparison to what Bo does. There's an easier transition between BLM and Mayer than there is between him and O'Connor, I believe. So I think that factored into the decision. And I think when we're trying to translate what Dave Dickinson was saying about a better week of practice, that's probably what it came down to, is fit.
With the Elks and Argonauts game now postponed, week number 4 begins in Montreal with the 1-1 Alouettes and the 0-2 Tiger Cats. Let's talk about the Alouettes first. I'll say this, and we'll get you to respond, Davis, first. I thought the Alouettes played a horrible football game. Not taking anything away from the man we just talked about in Mayer and Calgary Stampeders. I was very surprised compared to what I saw in week number 1 to week number 2 to that Alouettes club. Your thoughts?
They were terrible. It's you want to, look, all of us in media, you want to tell the good story. If you have an option to talk about the good or the bad, it's usually good to talk about the good, and Jake Mayer is a good story. So I know in some stuff we wanted to lead with that, but that was the worst performance I've ever seen from Vernon Adams. He was absolutely terrible. He wasn't reading the defense. He was missing throws. He wasn't taking care of the ball. And Matt, to your point, you want to see my picks and maybe why I'm so jaded by his performance. I bet the equivalent of a 2015 Mercedes SUV fully loaded on Montreal. And I thought that was an absolute lock. But VA was terrible. I mean, it is what it is. But I think you're going to get, there's good VA and bad VA just because of his skill set. I actually believe, this is my take on Vernon, he has a special, we all watch Damon Allen a lot, right? The special ability to move short bursts in the pocket, his quickness in the pocket, just those short bursts. Forget about a 40-yard dash, but just those short little quick bursts and elude rushers. That's truly special, and that's what VA has that nobody else has. You can bring any athlete, it's a quarterback that's fast in the league right now. No one has that little burst. So he's really hard to bring down. He's got a big arm, but he makes bad decisions. He's not accurate with his throws all the time. So I believe he can be great, and he has the ceiling that no one else has because of those quick movements. But he makes some bad decisions, some bad throws. He was bad VA, and I think he was bad VA than they were good Calgary or good Jake Mayer, to be honest.
So sorry, Davis. I got to jump in here.
Yeah.
Because even with bad VA, they were 1 yard away from winning that football game. Like at the end of the day, you've got this guy at pivot, and he was not good VA. Like I've used that same term: good VA, bad VA. But when he's good, when he gets breaks, and when he rides momentum, he's a momentum guy, right? We don't have a most exciting player award in the Canadian Football League, but he's at the top of my list through 2019 and early this year to be the most exciting. Now, most exciting certainly doesn't mean most perfect, but he got them 1 yard away from a win, and that is somewhat remarkable considering that performance we saw not only by him but also by his receivers, which dropped balls all over the place that evening.
And on top of that, 18 penalties as well. To Davis's point, how Montreal played a horrible game, and it's hard to keep offensive momentum going if you're constantly getting penalties. And by the way, Davis, I feel for you. Though my bet wasn't as bad, I was in Vegas, and I put down a bet on the Calgary Stampeders when we thought Bo Levi Mitchell was healthy to beat the BC Lions when we didn't know if Mike Riley was going to be in. And I strut up the Caesars. I'm like, hey, CFL.ca's Matt Cauz. I'm Johnny CFL here, and that didn't work out for me. It was basically a pair of jeans and a good bottle of Napa Cab that I dropped on my bet, and I also didn't win. So.
Guys, okay, so we can't hide from the obvious. This is the Tiger Cats audio network. So I'll have to ask you the question here. Davis, we'll start with you here. This is probably a very important week of practice for the Tiger Cats. What are you seeing in that 0-2 start? I think we have to also balance it, and I got to put my little personality into this for a second here. They were facing arguably the best front four for both teams out of Saskatchewan and Winnipeg. And that made things real tough for Jeremiah Masoli. And there's questions about if he should be the starter, et cetera, et cetera. Should he be the starter? And what are you seeing in that 0-2 start that they need to correct to be 0-3? That's to be 1-2, sorry.
So I go with I've used this before. I'll go with a fantasy football analysis here. If you sit down Jeremiah Masoli and you don't make him your starter, I will pick him up off the wire right now. Before his butt hits the bench, I'm picking him up. JM to me is definitely a top 5 quarterback in the league. So he's definitely starting. If you watch, look, that offense, you guys follow the Ticats, that offensive line with the injuries they had, he was getting a ton of pressure on him against, to your point, some good defensive lines early. And then Speedy B is their best receiver. But if I'm going to take one guy that I might need, or even two guys that I might need, versus when there's an O-line that's patchwork and against good defensive fronts, I'm taking Braylon Addison as my number 1, and I might take Posey as 2, because those are both guys who will make the tough catches across the middle. Speedy will as well, but those are just bigger body guys. You can get the ball too quick in the middle of the field, and he didn't have that. And it's not.
It sounds like he's not going to have him for at least 6 weeks.
Right. Well, you got to protect, and you got to keep people in, and you got to ISO, with tight ends and running back and 2 backs, and then ISO outside down the field. But you can't play 3-step drop, 5-step drop, get the ball to your hands when you don't have protection. That's what I saw. It was a total protection thing, and Jeremiah wasn't good. He wasn't at his best. I'm sure he'll admit that. But to talk quarterback change when you have a guy as good as Jeremiah, I think is foolish.
Jim, what are you seeing from that team, that 0-2 Ticats team?
Well, the inability to establish the run. I think the teams that have had success early this season on offense, and there has been limited success on offense right across this league in the first couple of weeks, have had something resembling a running game, and they're not necessarily getting it. Now they've had to abandon it in some cases, but they need more production there. The other thing, though, is, let's not pull the plug on these guys too soon. They were on the road to start 2 games in Western Canada against arguably the 2 best teams in the Western Division, period. So, if we're talking about if we're talking about getting reestablished at home and getting back into a rhythm of being at home, and I will say that the Ticats probably feed off that home audience, probably second best in the CFL. Maybe Saskatchewan's the best. Getting back to home after a very odd start without an exhibition season is going to be fairly key for them in terms of refocusing and putting 0-2 in the rearview mirror.
Matt Cauz, you won't say it, but I'm going to say it. I know you're an Argonaut fan. Are you licking your chops?
Yes.
Are you licking your chops right now with the Tiger Cats?
Let me say this, and not just because I'm on this network. I also did a lot of coverage for the Ticats. I went to school at McMaster. I'm one of the unique weirdos where when it's Toronto not playing Hamilton, I'm rooting for the Ticats. I'm still shocked Caleros never won a Grey Cup in Hamilton with the Tabbies. So I mean, yeah, there is, of course, a little bit licking their chops. I am wearing a double blue shirt here, so, that may be a coincidence or not. But in terms of the quarterback change, the issue's been the game was in the Grey Cup, and he wasn't able to handle the pass rush that Winnipeg threw on him. So I would keep with Jeremiah Masoli, and obviously the injuries and losing Riker Matthews. This is having a big impact. We talk about how offense takes longer to catch up. I think it's going to take a while just for Hamilton's offensive line just to be able to find their rhythm and trust, and everyone working on the same page. And the crazy thing about Hamilton is that first drive against Winnipeg was gorgeous. And the 37-yard touchdown pass, it looked great. I remember tweeting out, I'm like, oh, who says offenses are going to be behind? Again, I was wrong. It's a constant theme here. But I am amazed by the lack of production, considering this was a 15-3 team. But I'm going to need about 2 or 3 more weeks before I get super nervous.
But guys, let me throw this to you. Is there a pressure thing knowing that you're hosting the Grey Cup? Is that a pressure thing, or is that something that's secondary?
Yeah. Of course there's expectations. They were 15-3. They were the favorite to win the Grey Cup. Most of us picked them to win the Grey Cup. And then coming into this year, they were considered the class of the East. And, though they lost some big-time players, almost every team loses players. It's just kind of the nature of the game. And it seemed like they were the best equipped because they had 2 quarterbacks that you felt really good about. And one final thought, when Toronto beat Winnipeg, they were able to run the ball really well. They were able to establish a run, certainly more so than what we've seen from Hamilton.
Davis, when you have a coach like Orlando Steinauer, I feel like he's the kind of guy that can fix this real quick.
You know what, Bub? I'm going to turn this around on you for a quick second. I just wanted to get your sense on this, because your sense on what the feel is because of the loss last year in the Grey Cup. Because I heard you talking about before about being in that locker room after the Grey Cup and getting ready. We all thought they were going to win that game. I think that has a carryover to the 0-2 start. You were discussing the part of where you're in the locker room getting ready to ask questions about how it feels to win a Grey Cup. We all thought that Hamilton was going to win that game. And then you had to pivot to, oh my gosh, this was a blowout. And now we're at 0-2 with the team that we all thought, most of us think that was the best team entering this year. Is there a carryover, a hangover from that, the Grey Cup loss to 0-2? Is there some self-doubt? Someone has been in there? Because I haven't had a chance to talk to these guys.
Well, yeah, and that's a great point that you bring up, because I did say, and I've said this in several other, conversations around the nation, that going into that locker room, and you're right. I mean, I won't lie. I expected them to win that Grey Cup game, and going into that locker room in a Grey Cup loss was one of the most difficult assignments I've ever had. Seeing that kind of sadness, that kind of shock, that kind of anger across each individual's face. I will say this. I will say that if there was a 2020 season, it would have been a different thing. I feel like this 2021 team is different. There were some retirements. Mike Filer is a very important part of that club as the center on that team. So I think when you lose him and you've got to take your starting right guard and move him into center, hey, you played the game. That's a guy that's calling protection. He's learning the game on the fly right now, again, with no preseason games. And we have to remember that too. And I know we all love preseason games, but I think the players need it for some preparation. I think they can get this thing turned around. And that's why I actually ask you about Steinauer, because I think he's the kind of guy that has a good staff, an experienced staff, and they're going to put these guys to the test. And I still think that, you know what, the home crowd, the home games at the back end of the season are going to be a major factor for the Tiger Cats. And they may have played their two most difficult games already. So they may have been filed away in the bank. And if you're going to get exposed, you might as well get exposed early, because now you've had a week off to fix whatever is ailing you.
Yeah, I'll answer that Orlando question real fast. He's never been through this, guys. He's only won as a head coach, but I think, you know, his demeanor, his confidence, and the fact he's, you know, played a long time and been a leader as a player as well. I don't think he'll panic. So that's my answer to I believe the question was how will they react or how will they feel. But with him as a leader, I think that room's in good shape.
Davis, I got to ask Davis a question here. Davis, were you on the 2011 BC Lions?
I was.
Yeah. Well, how did they start?
Okay, quick story, because self-deprecation is a great thing. I started the first 5 games of that season at cornerback. We were 0-5, and Wally came, and I had elbow surgery, or I had left the year before with the elbow and been out, so I was rehabbing. I finally came back. It wasn't healthy yet. Wally came to me after 5 games and was like, "We're sitting your butt down." And I stunk the first 5 games. And I was also 36 years old. So trying to play corner at 36, running about a 4.9, I think Bubba could have probably beat me in a 40. And I wasn't having much success. So Wally said, "Look, we're gonna sit you down." I said, "Wally, you can't, you want to cut me?" I said, "You can't cut me. I got a dislocated elbow here. I'm playing through pain. You either pay me and we will work through something, or, you know, whatever you want to do." So Wally was gracious enough to say, "Okay, look, we're going to just tell the media that you're having season-ending surgery. You go have your surgery. We pay you for the rest of the year, and everything's good." We both agreed to that. Nice way to end, but really I was going to get cut. And that was the end of my career. But they won. After the point is, they won that game. Or they won every game, or 10 in a row from then on, after they sat me down, and then went on to win a Grey Cup. So
at home, right?
Yes, exactly.
So they had that Grey Cup pressure at home. Yeah. You played out of 2 home stadiums. It was a strange situation, because you were out at Empire, and then you moved into BC Place. There was the Grey Cup pressure there. You started 1-6. You were part of the 0-5, but you won that next game. Lost the next one. 1-6 start, and went on to win the Grey Cup. So if there are people panicking in the Hammer, don't panic. There's no reason to panic here.
I will say this quickly, different story, Jim, because that BC team wasn't good, or expectations weren't there. Yeah. This Hamilton team is the favorite to win, so I think there's a lot more. I don't think there was pressure on that BC team. It was just a storybook ending in got hot in a great run. But this Hamilton team, I think, has pressure, because everyone thinks they were going to the Grey Cup, or at least the favorite, and then what happened last year.
Matt, I'll leave the final word to you.
I think Hamilton is going to turn this around, and I think that I'd like to Davis Sanchez. I want to do a 40 against you right now, buddy. How do and we'll put up the money that we've lost on Calgary because of Calgary bets over the first 3 weeks of the season.
Guys, this has been absolutely outstanding. This is the CFL This Week, and of course, we're going to thank the likes of Matt Cauz, as I said, the always unpredictable one, Jim Mullin, steady Eddie as he always goes, and Davis, I'll take you on in a 40 any day. Let's do it. Thank you so much for joining us there, guys. We look forward to talking to you again, folks. This has been the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network.